and cover. Be sure and remember what Bert the Turtle just did, friends, because every one of us must remember to do the same thing. That's what this film is all about. Duck and cover. Paul and Patty know this. No matter where they go or what they do, they always try to remember what to do if the atom bomb explodes right then. It's a bomb. Duck and cover. Sundays, holidays, vacation time, we must be ready every day, all the time, to do the right thing if the atomic bomb explodes. Duck and cover. That's the first thing to do. Duck and cover. First, you duck. And then you cover. You duck and cover tight. Duck and cover under the table. It's a bomb. Duck and cover.
He did what we all must learn to do. You and you and you and you. Duck and cover.
The Cold War, an era of fear, espionage, and nuclear brinkmanship. Tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union escalated, threatening global stability. But how did we reach this point? After World War II, the world split between two superpowers, the capitalist United States and the communist Soviet Union. This rivalry ignited the Cold War, marked by political conflict and military standoffs. As both sides stockpiled nuclear weapons, proxy wars erupted around the world, each conflict a potential global crisis. But the most dangerous confrontation was yet to come. The roots of U.S.-Cuba tensions stretch back to the Spanish-American War of 1898. After defeating Spain, the U.S. gained control over Cuba, effectively turning it into a protectorate. For decades, American businesses dominated Cuban industries, and the U.S. supported authoritarian leaders who protected these interests. By the 1950s, Cuban resentment grew under the corrupt and U.S.-backed dictator Fulgencio Batista. Enter Fidel Castro, a revolutionary who promised to end foreign exploitation and restore Cuban sovereignty. In 1959, his forces overthrew Batista, marking the beginning of a new era, one that would bring Cuba closer to the Soviet Union and put it on a collusion course with the U.S. With Cuba now a Soviet ally just 90 miles from American shores, tensions between the superpowers reached new heights, setting the stage for the Cuban Missile Crisis. In October 1962, American spy planes discovered Soviet nuclear missiles being installed in Cuba, just 90 miles from U.S. shores. The world held its breath.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere. It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union.
In response, the U.S. imposed a naval blockade around Cuba, demanding the removal of the missiles. For 13 days, the world stood on the edge of nuclear war. Soviet ships approached the blockade, and both nations prepared for the worst. After intense negotiations, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev agreed to remove the missiles in exchange for a U.S. promise not to invade Cuba and a secret agreement to remove American missiles from Turkey. The Cuban Missile Crisis was the closest the world ever came to nuclear war. It served as a wake-up call for both superpowers. Leaders in Washington and Moscow recognized the urgent need to ease tensions and prevent future confrontations that could end in catastrophe. To ensure clearer communications, the US and USSR established the Washington Moscow Hotline, allowing direct contact between their leaders to avoid misunderstandings. In the years that followed, both nations took steps towards arms control, leading to agreements like the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty and later the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, also known as SALT. These efforts underscored the necessity of diplomacy over conflict. Though the Cold War continued for decades, the Cuban Missile Crisis proved that diplomacy, rather than destruction, was the key to survival in an age of nuclear weapons. The lesson was clear: the world could not afford to stand on the brink of war again.